In an age when science had become humanity's most powerful torch, illuminating the darkest corners of the material universe, there stood the Great Observatory of Lumina. Its purpose was singular: to map the entirety of existence, to answer all questions through rigorous observation, experimentation, and logical deduction. Its motto, etched above the grand entrance, read, Omnia Scire Estate Nobis Lumen. To know all things is our light. Within its hallowed halls worked Dr. Eris Thorne, a brilliant astrophysicist. For him, science was the ultimate key. He believed that every phenomenon, from the dance of subatomic particles to the grand cosmic ballet, would eventually yield its secrets to the scientific method. Any question that science could not yet answer was simply a temporary challenge, a frontier awaiting conquest. He envisioned a future where all questions found their resolution in the elegant equations and empirical data of science. Among the scholars was also Lyra, a philosopher of science and a poet. While she deeply respected the power and achievements of science, she often wandered the observatory gardens at night, gazing at the same stars Thorne charted, but asking different kinds of questions. Questions about meaning, purpose, beauty, and the nature of consciousness itself. She wondered if the telescope, however powerful, could ever capture the entirety of human experience or answer the deepest yearnings of the human heart. She felt there were limits to what science, by its very nature, could address. And then there was Elder Alara, the observatory's first director, now retired but still a revered presence. She had witnessed decades of scientific breakthroughs, the exhilarating expansion of knowledge, but also the persistent emergence of new mysteries with every answered question. She understood both Thorne's fervent faith in scientific omnipotence and Lyra's thoughtful reservations about its limits. One day, a celestial anomaly was detected, a phenomenon that defied all known physical laws, a question mark blazing in the cosmos. Thorne and his team worked feverishly, applying every known theory, every analytical tool. Science provided immense data, charted its trajectory, analyzed its emissions, but its fundamental nature, its why, remained stubbornly elusive. During a moment of collective frustration, Elder Alara addressed the assembled scientists and Lyra. "You have pushed the boundaries of science further than any generation before," she began, her voice calm amidst the intellectual storm. "You seek to answer all questions with this magnificent instrument. And indeed, science is a profound light, revealing wonders beyond imagining. But tell me, Eris," she turned to Thorne, "can your equations measure the awe you feel when you witness a supernova? Can your spectrographs capture the love that binds a family, or the solace found in a piece of music?" She then turned to Lyra. "And you, Lyra, who ponder the questions that lie beyond the empirical, do you suggest we abandon the rigorous pursuit of scientific understanding simply because it has its limits? Does the inability of a map to convey the scent of a forest render the map useless for navigation?" Alara gestured towards the great telescope, then towards the open window revealing the vast night sky. "Science is a powerful lens, perhaps the most powerful we have for understanding the physical universe. It answers how things work with astonishing precision. But are there not other questions, questions of why, of meaning, of value, of subjective experience, that require different kinds of lenses, different ways of knowing? Perhaps the true wisdom lies not in expecting one instrument to answer all questions, but in understanding the unique strengths and inherent limits of each way of seeking, and in learning how they might complement each other in our grand human quest for understanding." Elder Alara's words, spoken in the heart of that temple of science, resonate far beyond its walls. They echo a question that humanity has pondered with increasing urgency as the reach of scientific understanding has expanded, a question about the scope, the power, and the potential limits of our most successful way of knowing. Can science answer all questions? In an era defined by breathtaking scientific and technological advancements, it can sometimes feel as though no mystery is ultimately beyond its grasp. From unraveling the genetic code to peering into the origins of the cosmos, science has provided answers that were once the domain of myth and speculation. It has cured diseases, connected the globe, and transformed our material existence. Yet, alongside this triumphant march of discovery, there persists a quiet hum of other questions that seem to slip through the finely woven net of the scientific method. Questions about the nature of consciousness, the foundations of morality, the experience of beauty, the search for meaning and purpose in life, the reality of subjective experience. Are these simply questions that science hasn't answered yet? Or are they questions that science, by its very methodology and focus, is not equipped to answer fully, or perhaps at all? To explore the limits of science is not to diminish its extraordinary achievements or its profound importance. It is, rather, an act of intellectual honesty, an attempt to understand the nature of this powerful tool more completely. It's about recognizing what science does best and where other modes of inquiry, philosophy, art, spirituality, personal experience, might offer complementary or even essential perspectives. If science does have limits, what are they? Are they temporary boundaries that will recede with further research, or are they inherent to its very nature? And if there are questions that science cannot answer, how then do we approach them? Do we dismiss them as meaningless, or do we seek other pathways to understanding? Let us, therefore, embark on this inquiry with both a deep appreciation for the illuminating power of science and a courageous willingness to explore the horizons of its reach, to ponder the questions that may lie beyond its current, or even ultimate, gaze. To understand the potential limits of science, we must first appreciate its nature and its scope. Science, at its core, is a systematic enterprise that builds and organizes knowledge in the form of testable explanations and predictable theories about the universe. Its methodology generally involves observation, hypothesis formulation, experimentation, data analysis, and peer review. It seeks to understand the natural world through empirical evidence and logical reasoning. The strengths of this approach are undeniable. Science excels at explaining the how of the physical world. It uncovers causal relationships, identifies patterns, and creates models that allow us to predict and often manipulate natural phenomena. Its findings are, ideally, objective, repeatable, and falsifiable, meaning they can be tested and potentially proven wrong, which is a cornerstone of scientific progress. However, the very strengths of the scientific method also define its inherent limits. Science primarily deals with the empirical, the measurable, the observable. Its domain is the natural world, governed by physical laws. One significant area often cited as a potential limit for science is the realm of metaphysics. Metaphysical questions concern the fundamental nature of reality, existence, and being. Questions like, why is there something rather than nothing? What is the nature of time? Does free will exist? These are profound questions, but they often lie beyond the reach of empirical testing. Science can describe the Big Bang and the subsequent evolution of the universe, but it cannot, by its current methods, explain why the Big Bang occurred, or what, if anything, preceded it. It can study the neural correlates of decision-making, but whether this constitutes genuine free will remains a philosophical debate. Another domain involves questions of value, ethics, and morality. Science can describe how humans behave, the evolutionary roots of altruism or aggression, and the neurological basis of moral decision-making. It can inform us about the consequences of our actions, e.g., the environmental impact of pollution. However, science cannot, by itself, tell us what is morally right or wrong, what we ought to do. Prescriptive ethical statements, like "it is wrong to steal" or "we should strive for justice," are not derived from scientific experiments. They arise from philosophical reasoning, cultural norms, religious teachings, and empathetic human experience. While science can provide crucial data for ethical deliberation, it does not generate the ethical principles themselves. Similarly, questions of meaning, purpose, and ultimate concern often fall outside the scientific purview. Science can explain the biological drive for survival and reproduction, but it cannot tell an individual what the meaning of their personal life is, or whether there is an ultimate purpose to existence. These are existential questions that individuals and cultures grapple with through philosophy, spirituality, art, and personal reflection. Subjective experience and consciousness present another profound challenge. Science, particularly neuroscience, has made incredible strides in understanding the brain, the physical organ associated with consciousness. We can map neural activity, identify correlations between brain states and subjective reports, e.g., feeling happy, seeing red. However, there is what philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. Why and how do physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective, qualitative experience, the inner, first-person feeling of what it's like to be? Science can describe the neural correlates of consciousness, the easy problems, but the fundamental nature of subjective awareness itself remains deeply mysterious and perhaps methodologically elusive for a purely third-person, objective approach. Furthermore, science operates on certain foundational assumptions. For example, the uniformity of nature, the laws of physics are the same everywhere and at all times. The intelligibility of the universe, it can be understood through reason and observation, and the reliability of our senses and reasoning, with appropriate checks and balances. These assumptions themselves are not typically proven by science, but are philosophical presuppositions that make the scientific enterprise possible. It is also important to note that the limits of science are not necessarily static. What seems beyond scientific reach today might become amenable to scientific inquiry tomorrow as new theories, technologies, and methodologies develop. However, some limits may be inherent to the very definition and methodology of science as a way of knowing that focuses on the empirical and the falsifiable. Recognizing these limits is not a failure of science, but a mature understanding of its domain of expertise. It allows us to appreciate what science offers while also recognizing the validity and necessity of other forms of human inquiry for addressing the full spectrum of human questions and concerns. When we turn the Dharma mirror to the question of whether science can answer all questions, Buddhist thought offers a perspective that is both pragmatic and profound. The Buddha himself was often characterized by a form of intellectual caution, focusing his teachings on a specific, vital domain, the understanding and cessation of suffering, *dukkha*. There is a famous parable, the parable of the poisoned arrow, Majjhima Nikaya 63, which illustrates this focus. A man is struck by a poisoned arrow, and his friends and relatives want to call a surgeon. But the wounded man insists that before the arrow is removed, he must first know the name of the man who shot him, his caste, his village, whether he was tall or short, dark or fair, what kind of bow he used, what kind of arrow, etc. The Buddha points out that the man would die before he had the answers to all these speculative questions. The urgent task is to remove the arrow and treat the wound. Similarly, the Buddha often set aside certain metaphysical questions as undeclared or unanswered. *Avyakata*. These included questions about whether the world is eternal or not eternal, finite or infinite, whether the soul or self is the same as the body or different from it, whether a fully enlightened being, Tathagata, exists after death or does not, or both or neither. He considered these questions to be unhelpful for the primary goal of spiritual liberation. Engaging in such speculation, he taught, does not lead to disenchantment, dispassion, cessation, peace, direct knowledge, awakening, or nibbana. This doesn't necessarily mean these questions are inherently meaningless, but rather that their pursuit, within the context of the Buddhist path, is not conducive to the ultimate aim. The Buddha's approach was intensely practical. He taught what was directly relevant to understanding the cause of suffering and the path to its end. His science, if you will, was a science of the mind, an introspective investigation into the nature of experience and the dynamics of suffering and liberation. So, from a Buddhist perspective, science as we understand it today, the empirical study of the physical world, is a valid and useful form of conventional knowledge, *samudhisaka*. It can help us understand the workings of the cosmos, the human body, and the environment, and it can lead to technologies that alleviate certain forms of physical suffering and improve material well-being. There is nothing in Buddhist teachings that inherently contradicts or opposes the findings of empirical science concerning the natural world, as long as those findings are understood within their proper domain. However, Buddhism would also recognize the limits of science in addressing ultimate questions, particularly those related to the nature of consciousness from a first-person perspective, the deeper causes of existential suffering, rooted in ignorance, craving, and aversion, and the path to ultimate liberation. These are areas that require introspective investigation, meditative cultivation, and the development of wisdom, that transcends mere intellectual or empirical knowledge. For instance, science can describe the neurochemical processes associated with stress or anxiety. Buddhist meditation, on the other hand, offers a method for directly observing the arising and ceasing of these mental states, understanding their conditioned nature, and cultivating an inner freedom from their grip. Science might analyze the composition of a tear. Buddhist wisdom understands the suffering that produced it and the compassion that can alleviate it. Furthermore, the Buddhist understanding of causality, particularly dependent origination, offers a framework that is both compatible with scientific notions of cause and effect in the physical realm, but also extends to the intricate conditioning of mental and emotional states. The focus is on understanding the conditions that give rise to suffering and the conditions that lead to its cessation, a deeply empirical investigation, but one conducted primarily through introspective awareness rather than external instrumentation. Therefore, Buddhism would likely affirm that while science is a powerful tool for understanding certain aspects of reality and can answer many important questions about the physical world, it cannot, by its nature, answer all questions that are vital for human flourishing and spiritual liberation. Questions of ultimate meaning, the nature of mind itself, and the path to ending existential suffering require a different kind of inquiry, one that turns the lens of investigation inward. Elder Alera's wisdom in the observatory pointed to the need for different kinds of lenses for different kinds of questions. This suggests an inner shift in our approach to knowledge, a move beyond seeing science as the sole arbiter of truth, towards cultivating a more holistic understanding that embraces multiple ways of knowing and acknowledges the inherent limits of any single method. This inner shift begins with humility. Intellectual humility involves recognizing that no single system of thought, including science, holds a monopoly on truth or can answer all questions. It's an openness to the vastness of mystery that still surrounds us, despite our incredible advancements in knowledge. It's understanding that the map is not the territory, and that our scientific models, however sophisticated, are still representations of reality, not reality itself. Next, it involves cultivating discernment, the ability to recognize which questions are amenable to scientific inquiry and which may require other approaches. When faced with a question, we can ask, is this an empirical question about the natural world that can be tested and measured? Or is it a question about meaning, value, subjective experience, or ultimate reality that might call for philosophical reflection, artistic exploration, spiritual practice, or deep personal introspection. This discernment allows us to appreciate science for what it does best, without burdening it with expectations it cannot meet. We don't ask a physicist to compose a symphony, nor a poet to design a particle accelerator. Similarly, we shouldn't expect science alone to provide all the answers to the multifaceted questions of human existence. This leads to an appreciation for complementary ways of knowing. Philosophy can help us clarify concepts, examine assumptions, and explore logical possibilities that lie beyond empirical testing. Art can offer profound insights into the human condition, evoke empathy, and communicate truths that are difficult to express in discursive language. Spiritual traditions offer pathways for exploring inner experience, cultivating ethical awareness, and seeking connection with a larger sense of meaning or reality. Personal experience, intuition, and emotional intelligence also play vital roles in navigating our lives and relationships. An integrated approach to knowledge involves valuing these diverse perspectives and seeking to understand how they might inform and enrich one another. For example, scientific findings about the brain can inform philosophical discussions about consciousness. Ethical considerations, informed by philosophy and human empathy, can guide the responsible application of scientific discoveries. Meditative practices, from spiritual traditions, can enhance self-awareness and potentially even offer new avenues for studying the mind. This inner shift also means moving beyond a purely informational view of knowledge towards a transformational one. While science provides invaluable information about the world, other ways of knowing often aim at a deeper transformation of the knower, cultivating wisdom, compassion, and a more profound sense of connection and purpose. The goal is not just to know more, but to be more aware, more ethical, more fulfilled. This requires courage, the courage to embrace uncertainty, to live with unanswered questions, and to venture beyond the familiar territory of established scientific paradigms when exploring the deeper dimensions of life. It's the courage to acknowledge that some of the most important truths may be found not in definitive answers, but in the ongoing process of seeking, questioning, and living with an open heart and mind. By cultivating humility, discernment, and appreciation for complementary ways of knowing, and a focus on transformative wisdom, we can navigate the limits of science not as a boundary of defeat, but as a horizon that invites us to explore the vast and varied landscape of human understanding in all its richness. As our exploration of the limits of science draws to a reflective pause, the echo from the Great Observatory of Lumina is not one of disillusionment, but of a broadened perspective. The question was never intended to diminish the profound light that science casts upon our world, but to understand the full spectrum of illumination required to navigate the human condition. We have seen that science, with its rigorous methodology and empirical focus, is an unparalleled tool for understanding the physical universe, for answering the how of material existence. Its achievements are monumental, its contributions to human well-being immense. Yet, we have also acknowledged that there are vast domains of human concern, questions of ultimate meaning, purpose, value, subjective experience, and the fundamental nature of reality, where science, by its very nature, may not provide complete answers, or perhaps any direct answers at all. These are not necessarily deficiencies of science, but rather reflections of its specific domain of expertise. The wisdom from the DhammaMirror, with its pragmatic focus on alleviating suffering and its distinction between conventional and ultimate concerns, reminds us that not all questions are equally vital for our deepest liberation, and that introspective inquiry is essential for understanding the mind itself. So, can science answer all questions? The reflection echoing back suggests, no, not alone. And perhaps that is not its purpose. Its purpose is to be the best possible tool for understanding the natural world. For the rest, for the questions that define our humanity in its fullest sense, We need a richer toolkit, a symphony of approaches. What if true wisdom lies not in seeking a single source for all answers, but in cultivating the ability to draw from multiple wells of understanding? The empirical rigor of science, the analytical clarity of philosophy, the evocative power of art, the introspective depth of spiritual practice, and the lived wisdom of human experience. What if the limits of science are not walls, but horizons that invite us to look further, to explore more broadly, and to integrate all that we learn into a more complete, compassionate, and meaningful understanding of ourselves and our place in this magnificent, mysterious universe? The relationship between science and the broader quest for human understanding is a dynamic and evolving conversation. Acknowledging the limits of science opens the door to a richer, more integrated approach to life's all questions. If this exploration has sparked your curiosity or offered a new perspective, we invite you to continue this journey of inquiry with us at the Noble Wisdom Path. Subscribe to our channel for more discussions on the great questions that shape our lives. If this episode has resonated with you, please give it a like. And we warmly encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What questions do you feel science can and cannot answer? How do you approach those questions that lie beyond its current reach? Your insights enrich our collective exploration. May your quest for understanding be guided by both the bright light of science and the diverse wisdom of the human spirit, leading you to a life of clarity, meaning, and compassion.